Good day. Welcome to Stronger Vision Podcast. So today we got Chris McMahon on the episode, and we're going to dive into what it was like with him growing up being a skinnier kid, the struggles he had with him being a type 1 diabetic, how he can actually eat as many calories as me, even though he is 50 pounds lighter than me, how he is making fitness fit being a father, and much more. Chris is very passionate about what he does, and he's very well spoken. So I think you're going to really enjoy this episode. So without further ado, here is Chris McMahon. Good day, Chris. Thank you so much for being here. How are you today, sir?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, Rylan.
Well, it's awesome. Fellow online trainer, and I don't do much of a precursor of who the person is, just a little bit, but I want you to tell your story. So why don't you tell the listeners and viewers who you are and how you got to doing what you're doing now?
Yeah. So my name is Chris McMahon. I've been in the fitness industry for, I don't know, over a decade now. Kind of fell into it. It wasn't something I planned on doing. I went to school for musical theater. I was always a really skinny kid, very, very skinny. I believe the term is skinny fat, you could say. And then I got cast in this show that we were doing my sophomore year of college, and they told me if I was going to be playing this intimidating part, I had to look like not malnourished. And my buddy was going to school for anatomy, kinesiology, and he offered to train me. He was like, "Hey, I've never trained anyone before. I'll do it for free. Let's get to work." And I was like, "That sounds like a great price. Let's do it." And I started lifting weights for the first time in my life for maybe 4 or 5 days a week, probably eating close to like 4,000, maybe 4,500 calories per day, just eating and eating and eating and lifting. And I was a late bloomer too, and pretty hit. And I put on like 40 pounds, and I went back to school, and I looked like a completely different person. And suddenly I got attention from men and women because I went to musical theater school. So it was just like this strange thing. And then training became like a part of my life. Like I loved it. It was a great place for me to get out my anger and frustration, and to not feel like I was going to be bullied anymore. Like all the things I experienced as a kid from being small, like suddenly I was like, oh, I got this. And then I graduated, and that same buddy who trained me, he got me a job working at a gym in New York City, and I kind of hit the ground running. It was supposed to be my like side job while I was auditioning, and it just turned out that I was good at it. Like I'm a people person, so talking to people, listening, like all the skills I developed from being an actor worked really well because that is like active listening and empathizing and uh, so working in person for about 2.5 years. And then I slowly transitioned to being online and working for this other company, this company called GMB Fitness, which is like a calisthenics company that teaches people how to move their body with control. They call it physical autonomy. And slowly worked my way up there. I was on staff. If anyone has done any of their programs, you will probably see me in those videos because I would film stuff, and I traveled around the world teaching seminars for handstands and all those sorts of fun tricks and uh, flexibility and mobility, like all this stuff. And then the pandemic hit, and when the pandemic hit, I lost my job at GMB. My son was born within like 2 days of me losing my job. And we were at home, and I had to figure out like what I was going to do. And that's when I decided to start my own online coaching thing. Couldn't go work in a gym. I'm type 1 diabetic, so I'm immunocompromised. So I couldn't be in those places anyway, even if I wanted to. Um, and so it was me just like slowly trying to build this business and figuring it out and understanding it. And over time, I realized that I really loved working with parents. I really loved working with general pop. I loved my whole philosophy on this is like it's gotta be something. Something is always going to be better than nothing. Like that's the big philosophy. Ask any of my clients. something is always better than nothing. It always counts as a win. I say a win in the marble jar if you just show up and do a little thing. Like that's what matters. That's what builds consistency. And that's kind of what I've built my business into at this point. And when I'm not working, I'm hanging out with my son and my dog and my wife, and we have another kid on the way in like the next like 2 weeks. So I'm sure I'll be sleep deprived for a while. And yeah, so that's me in a nutshell. That's my story. I kind of condensed it down as much as I could. So yeah.
That's awesome. I really loved how you condensed it very well. It was a good flow, and congrats on the other kid coming on the way. That's super exciting.
Yeah.
I want to come back to the start of the story a little bit, because a couple of big struggles there that I think are really important to highlight. And it comes from, especially talking about the being this smaller, skinny kid. So this is very much the opposite spectrum that I was used to, and it didn't dawn on me until I was, in my adulthood with my friends who were the skinnier guys. But I always dealt with I was small because I was short, but I was the chubby kid. And I didn't realize skinny kids held insecurity. I actually didn't until I was later.
Yeah.
And all it took was a comment from someone in public calling him skinny, and he was just so rattled by it. And I was just like, whoa, I didn't realize that there was so much insecurity built into it. So just kind of go into that a little bit. How long did you have to struggle with that? How did that affect you throughout your childhood growing up?
I mean, I still deal with it. I think the patterns that we make when we're kids, they're always with us in some form.
Absolutely.
Like I've talked about this on my podcast. I've talked about this in content. Like when I went to day camp, like I'm talking like 13 years old, and it was middle of summer, I would wear jeans. I didn't like wearing shorts because some kid when I was younger told me I had chicken legs. And like that stuck with me for a really, really long time. And there's like this dysmorphic view of my own body. Like I can remember being like 8 or 9, and there were these kids who like genetically just had like a six pack. They weren't working out, they had it. And I can remember just sitting scrunched over with my little double chin that's like normal for a kid, and having the red lines like that are just normal lines from having skin on my stomach. And I can remember just being like, why don't I look like that kid? Like why, right? Why am I? And then in high school, it's like, well, why am I bullied by kids who are like a year younger than me? Like why? Like there was a lot of that. And it was the thing that was kind of my saving grace was like humor. Like I quickly learned that if I could be funny and be the first person to crack a joke, like I would de-escalate whatever was going on. So for me, it was very much like kind of accepted at a certain point that I was just thin. Like I was thin. I wasn't super athletic. I played baseball, but it was just like. And then I fell in with theater and doing a lot of performing arts and comedy, and that's just they're more accepting of like in my opinion, they're more accepting of how you look, at least when you're younger. And then, when you're in your 20s and you're being like looked at for how you look for a specific part, or when you're in callbacks for something on film, and then it boils down to like, well, how does he look? Too heavy, too lean, too. Then there's a lot of that which didn't help. But now it's kind of just like, yeah, it pops up sometimes. It's cool though, because I can see my son and I see a lot of myself in him, and I just know he's gonna hopefully have a better opinion of his own body image, just the way that my wife and we talk about ourselves, we talk about all this stuff. Like we're very much like, it's a different time period. It's a different time than like the 90s, which is, it's just like everyone's so much more accepting in a certain degree of things. And there's better language around this stuff. And just from the work that I do and the language I need to use and how I consult with other people, it's just a more healthier headspace, So that's kind of how that plays in at this point in my life.
Well, I really appreciate you sharing that, because it is such a real struggle. And I think coming from my own perspective and a lot of people in the fitness industry, because most people are trying to lose weight, not everyone. There's some people do want to gain size, but I think it's an important story to tell because it gets lost along the way because people are struggling with that form of insecurity as well, and it's a real challenge. And so for you to be able to overcome it with weights, 40 pounds in a short period of time is pretty incredible. So I'm curious, how long of a period of time was that you put on that kind of weight, and
That
what kind
was
of volume were you doing?
Yeah. So that was like 4 months. And I think the problem is that I wasn't eating enough. Like I went to college and I weighed 119 pounds.
Hmm.
And I'm 5'10".
Yeah.
And at the end of my freshman year, they talk about the freshman 20, I like was 117 pounds. So it's like, I was one of those kids who moved around a lot. Like I have a hard time sitting still and stuff. So my NEAT was just higher too. And so my buddy was like, all right, you're going to start having like, I hated things like peanut butter. Like I didn't like things that were naturally fattening, like because they were higher in calorie. Like that just wasn't a thing. And so my buddy was like, you're going to start eating peanut butter. I was like, what? He's like, you're going to put it in a protein shake. I was like, protein shake? So I was having like 3 protein shakes a day. I was eating 2 breakfasts, 2 lunch, a big dinner, like dessert. Like I was eating to the point like where I always felt like I was going to throw up a little bit. And like, that's what it has to be. If you want to put on weight, and you're someone who in general struggles with that, you got to eat to being like 110% full versus being 80% full. You're going to be uncomfortable. Like it sounds exciting and fun, but for anyone who's ever tried to do like a bulk, it's fun for the first like maybe 20 days. And then like the thought of eating more than you need to just sounds like terrible. It's the last thing you want to do. And lifting wise, I was doing like bro splits. Like we were doing the workouts from Muscle and Fitness magazine, and it was just like I bench pressed, I did like curls, I did like sit-ups and deadlifts and front squats, and like I was lucky that my buddy knew kind of what he was doing, but also we had no idea what we were doing. We were only like, we were only 19. So I never stretched. I never foam rolled. I never did any of that stuff. So at the same time, I got really bound up and, I'd have back pain and all this stuff. I was like, it's normal. So that's really what it was. Like those first 4 months, I lifted like 5 days a week. I did no cardio and I just ate. I ate like it was my job. And surprise, surprise, I put on 40 pounds. Like it wasn't all muscle. It was a lot. Because I was a newbie, it had to be a percentage of muscle. But there was also fat on that too, which was fine. Like it's, you can't gain muscle without expecting to gain fat. It's just not. And that's what stops a lot of people from doing it too. Cause we get in our heads and we're like, the scale's going up. Oh, my pants don't fit right. It's like, yeah, if your pants don't fit right and it's been a month or two, like you're doing the right stuff, So that was kind of what was going on then. Also like when I got to college, I had never drank in my life. And then, I've been sober since 2019. I'm an alcoholic, and in college, I drank a lot, like a lot. And those terrible, but those extra calories contributed to me being able to put on size too, because they're calories. While, alcohol does mess with protein synthesis and everything, it calorie is a calorie. So that was also contributing to how much I was eating,
Right.
Then yeah, here we are now. I would never do that again. I just couldn't. I couldn't. Even if I wanted to, I just couldn't. Like eating 4 to 5,000 calories. Like it's not something I want to be doing. Just not.
Right. The struggle is real there. And again, it's important to hear the depiction for people who have a hard time with not eating a lot, like the deficit people, when you hear, and I was like this, I would hear people almost, complain about the surplus. And it's its own form of discomfort just because you're not aware of what it feels like. What people who, yo-yo diet or in deficits all the time, to me, it's because they've spent most of the time loving the feeling of feeling full and hating the feeling of being on a diet, but they keep doing it. And so you have this kind of, like you said, since you're a kid, building up this instinct around, oh, like a calorie surplus, like that feels good. Like this is my good feelings, versus when someone who's naturally leaner, you just naturally don't have as much of an appetite. And so now we're actually forcing you to do something that's more unnatural to you, something you've spent less time in, and it's your own form of discomfort. And like you had mentioned, I think what a lot of people don't know what it's like is like being in a bulk for a long period of time at just the right amount of calories with whole food. That's different than just not giving a shit about your diet. That's different than yo-yo dieting, because yo-yo dieters tend to have, I always say it's like micro, meso, or macro yo-yo dieters, which are either, on the day, they can not eat during the day and binge at night, or they can not eat during the week and then binge on the weekend, or they can, eat really good for a month and then binge for another month. But in those instances, a lot of them will go into binging and it'll be shitty food. Like if you try to eat what would be a slight calorie surplus for your body weight and size for more than a month, it does get exhausting. It becomes a lot of food. You're not even just holding that food volume. And I mean, I'm someone who has an appetite. It is not like if you told me, hey, you got to eat 4,000 calories for a month, put on a little weight, I wouldn't have too much of a problem, but I would still have a problem with it eventually. Like it's still going to add up. Where what's interesting about being a deficit or eating maintenance calories is you physically don't have the discomfort. You feel like you're digesting your food easier because there's less food volume. So you feel lighter on your feet. So it's its own discomfort that people just aren't really used to. And I think that's even why people have a hard time with doing proper build phases when they're used to yo-yo dieting, because they have to just, and I know this is my own mistake, is you have to give those calories some time to do what they're doing. And to see that weight might go up a little bit from the food volume, but it levels out. Like it levels out nice and slowly. And as you had mentioned, it's when you were doing it at the start, for people to have some context, like 40 pounds is pounds. So it's fat and lean mass and, just also like the food volume. But when your body is deprived of calories, like I actually did the same thing last year because I finished a bodybuilding show and I got to the leanest physique possible. Like I think they had me on the DEXA scan around 6% body fat. So I put on 40 pounds after that. Well, that's actually normal, right? Because my body is so deprived. Me trying to put on 40 pounds after that first 40, that's not going to happen for another like 5-10 years, right? If I'm constantly in a calorie surplus. So I think that context really matters, right?
Yeah, and I mean, to take it even a step further, if you've ever watched Always Sunny in Philadelphia, Rob McElhenney, who plays Mac, he, for one of the seasons, wanted to gain an obscene amount of weight. Like he just wanted to be morbidly obese. Like he wanted to, because he thought it would be funny, because a lot of shows, when they've been on X amount of time, you see those characters, you could think of like Friends, they have like a glow up where suddenly as the seasons go on and their paychecks get more and they can hire trainers and suddenly they look like models. And he was like, well, I'm going to do the opposite. I'm just going to gain a ton of weight. So he went to a doctor, like a nutritionist, to ask how to do this. And they're like, why the fuck would you do this? This is a horrible idea. And he was like, I want to do it for the show. So they told him how to do it. They were like, you're going to have like 2 cups of rice and this much chicken breast. And after like the third week of it, he's like, I can't do this. Like this food is not palatable. I can't. So he started to like drink ice cream, like full fat ice cream, and drink whole milk and just eat like shit, because it's easier to overconsume those things. Like it's just easier. And, being younger, like when I was 19, it was like, I would eat a whole pizza. It was like, but it was also, I was 19. Like if I tried to do that now, it just wouldn't end well. Like I'm just it just wouldn't end well. Again, I could do it. It's just like, what is the reward for doing that? Like, there is no reward. I'd be really uncomfortable. I'd have wicked heartburn. Like, I'd be all over the place. My blood sugar would go all over the place being a diabetic. So it's like, you got to look at how you do this. And in 2023, I did like a slight bulk. So I just increased my calories, slightly, just up my portion sizes of things, eating like 3,000 calories a day. And for me, that was slight. I was never like, I never felt like sick. I never felt anything. And I put on like 10 pounds and it was like, great. And it was almost like, I feel better. Because I probably needed the calories, and I'm just the person who doesn't, like, I have a thrifty metabolism, I guess. Like, I'm the person, if I'm consuming more, I'll go for like 1,400 steps a day, where I'm the person who's like fidgety all the time. I'm even moving while we're doing this. So it's like, those sorts of things matter, especially when you're working with someone too. It's like, cool, you're in a deficit. Oh, great. You're taking like 20 steps a day. The calories need to go up. I'd rather increase your calories and have you just go for 10,000 steps a day, be a little more active, and be able to enjoy yourself, versus like trying to drop everything, down. It's not sustainable. It's also an easy metric to track. Steps, it's completely arbitrary number, but it's just an easier way to track your movement throughout the day.
Yeah.
Versus me having you track how many times you blink, or how many times you click a pen, or how many times you shift positions. Like, that's ridiculous. But steps, that's more tangible. We can actually look at that and see the data with it. So just from like a realistic and a practical standpoint, it's like, oh, those are easier things to kind of look at too when you're in a deficit or surplus or whatever you're doing.
I totally agree. And I think I love hearing that story about just what your calorie surplus is. And this is an important context for people to take into consideration. Because so I am, just over 200 pounds. Right now I'm about 208. And even when I was in my surplus, when I was building up, I was about 214 average, 210. My calorie surplus is 3,000 calories. So Chris, how much do you weigh?
I weigh, right now, I'm in a mini cut. I weigh 150.
So you weigh 50 pounds less than me. Now you're a few inches taller. You're a couple inches taller. I'm 5'8". But just people need to appreciate that context. You are 50 pounds less than me, and we have the same calorie surplus. Mm-hmm. And that's what metabolism is. People don't appreciate how fidgeting actually applies to it. And just that, like, research has shown that people will spontaneously start to move more, and some people won't. Like, I won't. Like, I am naturally someone who will go in bursts and train hard, but if I'm not training, then I'm pretty sedentary. So what you're talking about here is using the steps is like, I can't be fidgety like you, although they're, got the Huberman research ideas where it's like you could just bump your calf up and down all day maybe, but you can't cause this. Like, the thing you can is say, okay, where is your movement on average? If we have, a step tracker, that's your average movement. Let's improve that form of movement in any way we can. And then, some people will get kind of like too caught up in it. It's like, oh, I biked and it didn't do anything. Well, consider it 10 minutes of biking is like 10 minutes of walking. Like, it's the same thing. We can titrate it in some way that we need to, but it at least gives you that simple metric that you can go after day to day, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think boiling it down to looking at smaller things is easier. Like, I just think it's easier. If we look at from a consistency standpoint, if you come to me and you're like, all right, I want to train I want to train 7 days a week. I want to do X or Y. And then I ask you, and this is a question that I ask all my clients. All right, I'm like, okay, the house is on fire. Your kid's homesick from school. Your dog just threw up. Like, what are you actually going to be able to do? And they're like, oh, maybe like 2 workouts. And I'm like, great. So that's what your goal is for this month. 2 workouts, without a doubt, come hell or high water, 2 workouts per week. Let's get that done. Okay. Well, I want to take at least 10,000 steps per day. Great. You're currently taking 5,000. Let's hit 6,000 steps per day.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you can be highly motivated, and it's not to diminish what a client wants to do. What it is, these are prime things that happen with all or nothing thinkers, which a lot of chronic dieters are, very much so. It's either I hit it, it's perfect, or fuck it. So it's very much working with someone to understand one of the traits of perfectionism is all or nothing, right? It's an uh, excessive expectation you put on yourself to hit this arbitrary thing. And if you don't hit the arbitrary thing, then it plays back into whatever stories you're telling yourself about being a failure, about not being good enough, about never being able to do X or Y. So why not then look at it from a different point of view and reframe it? And it's like, no, 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 no. I just have to meet myself where I'm at. And right now, 6,000 steps, it's only 1,000 more steps. That's like a 10-minute walk. Okay, I can do that. And then when that gets easier, then it's like, let's bump it up. You can literally periodize whatever you do. You can do nutritional periodization. You can do step periodization. For anyone listening, periodizing is just like how you're scaling your programming. So there's specific things going on so you can build volume. Like it would be completely unrealistic for me to just spit out some numbers at someone and be like, all right, here are your macros. Here's your step count. Here's your sleep. Here's how much water you need to drink. Like it's just that on paper it works. In reality, when you work with different individuals with completely different lives, you can't just expect everyone to do the same thing. In principle, yes, like you need to be in a calorie deficit. How we get to that deficit, what phase we're at, that depends on you. That depends on how you are. That depends on your lifestyle. Are you a shift worker? Are you someone with newborn kid at home? Are you someone who's single and in your early 30s? Your fucking life is going to be way different than my life, way different than your life, Rylan. Like it's just life is different for everyone, so we have to adjust so things can actually work and follow through, you know?
Totally appreciate the perspective of really hitting it on the all or nothing thinkers. So many chronic dieters are like this, and I really find that they need to appreciate what they're capable of. The yo-yo dieters, the all or nothing people, because especially yo-yo dieters, because they feel like failures a lot. But what you have to actually really encourage them to realize is like, man, you're the ones that keep going after it. You're the ones who actually have the best shot. And I think what's even more important is when people don't try because they watch yo-yo dieters fail and they'll say, oh, well, I don't want to just end up like that. It's like, okay, well, let's play this out. You got a friend that keeps trying all these diets and you do nothing. The all or nothing person is at least going to, like the yo-yo dieter has a good chance of figuring it out one day. Now, as you had mentioned, they just need to appreciate it's not the all or nothing. It's like the little bits. It's a little bits that they're going to go into making it more uniquely you. The thing that makes diets, like the fad diets and all these things, so appetizing for people is because people can follow a path to get a temporary result. You're borrowing someone's lifestyle, right? I always say you borrow a lifestyle, you borrow a result. Unless you're going to keep that lifestyle, you don't get to keep the result, right? But that's why diets can be sold, is because you get the temporary result. And then, oh, well, maybe that's what I'm missing. Maybe that's what I'm missing. I'm not doing it this way. And then eventually they may try it and maybe it works temporarily. And then it's like, yeah, but it's not you. Like, it's not you. So you have to make it more customized to you. And that's the help of a good coach, is not trying to sell you a specific diet planning that has a name. A diet plan that has a name is usually a bad sign, like the X diet. But having someone to meet you where you're at is so imperative. I wanted to come back to a unique part of your story for people to appreciate, and this will really go in well into talking about problems on social media, as you being a type 1 diabetic. And so how has that struggle been for you within your nutrition over the years?
I mean, I've been diabetic now longer than I've not had diabetes. I've been diabetic for almost 25 years. Diagnosed when I was 10, so almost 25 years. I think when I was a teenager, it was hard because I, like all teenagers, could not give a fuck. Like I just didn't want to have to take care of everything, be on top of all this stuff. And then when I got to college, there was this weird moment where I walked into a dining hall. I'd never eaten a salad before. I hated vegetables. And I walked into a dining hall and I was just like, I'm going to eat a salad. I don't know why. I don't know what possessed me to do it. Maybe it's because it was free food and it was all you could eat. Like, so I started doing that. And then, you know, my diabetes kind of started to get more in check. And now I'm at the point where my A1C, which is the average of my blood sugar over a 3-month course, like it's constantly like a 6.0 or lower. It's usually like a 5.8, 5.7. 5.6 is like normal. So like for me, it's the way I've been able to do that is just like I eat a lot of fruits and vegetables. I eat meat. I eat relatively normal portion sizes. I go for walks. I exercise. I get sleep. I go to therapy. I talk to friends. I talk to my wife. I play with my son. Like the way I manage my diabetes is just by doing boring things. There's no secret to it. There's no secret to it. The only way you can manage your diabetes, in my opinion, I'm not a medical doctor. I'm just someone who's had this for 20, almost 25 years, is just tracking your carbs, making sure you're giving yourself proper doses of insulin, if you're type 1 diabetic, that is, and just eat a shit ton of fiber. Like that's probably been the biggest one for me. I average about 60 to 70 grams of fiber per day. And that's just me. And that's me being able to eat a lot of food. But again, because it's fiber, it's lower in calorie foods, takes a longer time for the body to digest, keeps me full longer, stabilizes my blood sugar because of that. Like that's, you know, and again, taking 8 to 10,000 steps a day, those walks curb any sort of blood sugar spikes I could be having. Now, this is me being a diabetic, like a type 1 diabetic. This is not me saying non-diabetics should wear like a CGM or anything like that. I have to wear a continuous glucose monitor so I can actually monitor my blood sugar in real time, because blood sugar spikes for me, unlike folks with working pancreas, can be dangerous because my blood sugar spikes and it's not like, oh, it went up to 120. No, like if I spike it and I don't pay attention, get up to like 300, which is very dangerous. Chronically elevated blood sugar like that, like truly elevated as a diabetic, that's where like all-cause mortality rates go up. For average Joe who has a great working pancreas, if your blood sugar spikes, the insulin comes and it does its job.
Right.
And walking has direct correlation to reduction in those spikes because you're just doing some easy movement. It's stress reduction and your body can do its job. So that's a long, I don't even know if I answered your question, but I think for me, it's just like general activity should be increased, food consumption, moderate, and increase your fruits and vegetables. That's like what I would tell anyone who's trying to manage their weight too. You know, being leaner, I will say there is this unfortunate misconception that only people who are obese will have diabetes. I told you I was a skinny kid. Like I've been to doctors before at like a walk-in clinic or something, and I'll say, yeah, I'm type 1 diabetic. And they're like, you don't look diabetic. And I'll be, what the fuck does that mean? Like, where's your, what the fuck? You know? So it's like things like that. It's like, you don't look this or that. For anyone in the health space or anyone concerned about their health, there's no specific look for anything. And this is why, you know, this is where I can like empathize with someone who is overweight and understand what it must be like carrying this preconceived notion around with you. You know, it's so for me, working with a lot of clients who are struggling with those things, I can only imagine how hard it could be where suddenly you're walking around and now people are thinking X or Y about you when they have no idea. Yeah. It's like, you know, it's there's so much wrapped up in it. No one has the same story.
No, I think that's
no one does, you know?
Really beautiful sentiment. No one has the same story, and people can make out really unfair assumptions about it. And That blows me away that a doctor could be that stupid, because it just shows you how little some doctors know about nutrition. For him to say you don't look like a type 1 diabetic is like, do you fucking know what type 1 diabetes are? Because it requires you to like have like, that just literally means you can't do something genetically. Like, it blows me away that a guy could be that stupid and still have a PhD. Like, anyways, so
Yeah.
people understand, type
Yeah.
1 diabetes is a genetic disposition. It is
Yeah.
not brought on from high. So it's like, it makes sense if you're saying you don't look like someone with type 2 diabetes, because that is a process of eating a lot of sugar over a long period of time and things break down. But saying that a genetic oh, you don't look like it, you don't sound like a fucking smart doctor, right?
Yeah. So it's just, I think there's a lot of that. I think, and with social media, there's a lot of it too, saying that, people don't try hard enough, people aren't motivated enough, it's bullshit. It's just, you're not a therapist. You're a fucking personal trainer. Like, you're not, like, you don't know what's going in to this. You're probably not an expert on behavioral change. You're probably not an expert on trauma. You're not an expert on like all these things. And, there needs to be that level of awareness when you're coaching with people, or even when you're presenting yourself. It's just, I would never tell someone that they have to react a specific way or do a specific thing. Like, that's just not the best approach, in my opinion, for working with another individual. It's got to be a conversation. It can't be one-sided. You have to see the person. You have to ask them questions. You gotta be asking questions and listening. That's the way you get the best answers. And if you're the only one talking, you're not going to get any answers. That's just like, it's like talking to a wall.
Right. And you said it's like they have their story, and it's going to be almost impossible for you to totally know the experience of that individual struggle. Like, it really will be, unless you have something that's extremely similar in your own lifestyle, that maybe you had a very similar struggle, but you won't unless you understand by asking questions. You got to find out where they're coming from. What are their unique struggles? What are their unique parts of their story? That why aren't they working out? Why didn't they actually learn this in nutrition or go to actually cook the food? And you have to ask them those questions. Like, what is, I always call it like a bit of a stage fright wall. Like, so imagine for people, because this is one of the biggest fears that people have in the world, is public speaking. And you being an actor, you'll totally appreciate that you don't have this fear, right? Like, and I'm a public speaker too. I love public speaking. I don't have this fear. It's not a reality to me. But I've felt stage fright before, especially when I was younger trying to go talk to girls. It felt very terrifying to me. But it's all in your head. It's completely in your head. So I kind of use that analogy for myself to appreciate, what is your stage fright wall? Because people will not want to go and talk to people in public and create a million reasons not to do it. Very similar to how I'd create a million reasons not to go talk to a girl. And why are you not telling yourself to go cook the food, to go for the walk, to go for the training? And there's a lot of different rationale around it. You want to prioritize things that you're comfortable. Prioritize, okay, well, I actually got to go clean the kitchen, or I actually got to go do the laundry, or, I got this. It's like, but now it's my time. I kind of want to watch TV. So there's so many ways that we can basically rationalize our emotions to ourselves. And I had someone on my podcast that gave a really good breakdown of this. We always want to believe that it's think, feel, and then, it's feel, think, and then act. The feeling comes first. Then you want to believe that you're thinking it through, and then you act upon it. But it's really feel, act, and then think. So you're rationalizing what you've already made the decision of, right? It's like you're eating the candy, and it's like, well, I'm eating this candy because, or you just skip the rationale and you're just eating it. Or I'm skipping this workout because, it's like, you already made a decision to skip the workout. You're just rationalizing it at this point, right?
Yeah. There's in psychology, what's the name of the book? I can't even remember it, but there's self 1 and self 2. a great book about this is The Inner Game of Tennis. I had to read that actually like my freshman year of college, The Inner Game of Tennis. And there's self one and self two, and they're always arguing with each other. Self one, and I don't want to butcher this, self one is like the emotional. No, self one is the more rational side of yourself, and self two is the emotional one. The emotional one usually reacts first, and self one is sitting on the side going, what the fuck? Like, let's pause. And in the realm of like nutrition and behavior change and all of this fancy stuff, like the concept of like urge surfing, the idea that like we're all on this quest for what we call like radical acceptance. It is what it is. I'm not going to want to do this. It's okay. I'm going to show up and do it anyway. Well, that's very, very highly value-driven motivation. Fuck if you're going to be there right now. You're not. You're just not. But it's okay, because what we have to be aware of is that every time we show up just a little bit, even if it's just cutting up your vegetables and putting them in a Ziploc bag, you're putting a vote towards, I'm the person who preps food. Like, I'm the person who does this. You have to consistently prove it to yourself, though. You can't just say, I'm the person who, I'm amazing. No, what is actually allowing you to do that? And if we look at like trying to separate ourselves from it, well, why am I distracting myself? What is that distracted behavior accomplishing? You can't really look at habits and be like, oh, this is a bad habit. Well, no, actually the habit in and of itself has served you for some reason. Why do you have the habit of grabbing a candy bar? Why do you have the habit of skipping the gym? Why do you, at some point it was helping you. So let's not demonize it. Let's say, okay, well, how is it helping me? Well, when I'm really stressed, grabbing a piece of candy reminds me of when my grandma used to give me a Snickers bar every time she picked me up from school. Oh, so you want to feel warmth. You want to feel love. You want to feel, well, yeah, I would love to have that. Okay, well, what are some other things that can provide that? What are some forms of self-care that you can give yourself that have nothing fucking to do with candy? It's not saying candy's bad, because it's not, but using the same thing over and over and over again is bad. So let's look at some other options for you here. Well, I could go get a massage. Great, you have money for a massage. Go do that. Well, I could go for a walk. Fuck yeah, that's free. Go do that. You know, it just depends on where the person is, you know. And then the longer you can exist with those feelings, if we go back to urge surfing, there's a crest of a wave. That's when it's at your craving, your whatever is at the highest point. We have to learn to be able to sit, because then eventually it goes away. Like all other feelings, it's not going to last forever, although it feels that way in the moment, right? It feels that way. It never does. Right. Otherwise, I'd be angry 24/7. I would be happy 24/7. That would be exhausting. It's not normal to be one thing all the time. That's what makes you unique, right? And so when you start to talk about this with someone, it's like a light bulb goes off. Like, oh, I was never, oh shit. Like, were you even hungry in that moment? It's like, oh, no? Okay, cool. What were we trying to do there? Right? That's the sort of like, that's how we kind of have to look at these things. It's like, how is it serving you? What would be the worst thing that would happen if we stopped doing that? What would be the best thing that could happen if we stopped doing that? Right? It's like we got to look at the ends of the spectrum. And then it's like, oh, okay. All right, I could try this. I could try that. I could do this. Let's track and see if I notice any difference this week. Right? So that's just a little bit about how I operate with clients, but also how I like to operate with myself or with anyone. It's just like, what are we hoping to accomplish here? Like, right. What's going on?
Right. I really like that. Great questioning. The moment of when you're actually in that, why you're eating it. And so many people that I talk to, some of my clients, it's like, they just don't even ask the question. They're just doing it. And then what you had just said is, they're just like, oh, it's bad. And then they just basically put it behind them as like just a bad form of guilt and shame. And I actually try to direct people to say guilt isn't necessarily the worst emotion because it tells you you've done something that isn't in line with your values. So it's a signal, but you don't live in guilt, you listen to guilt. And there's a difference, right? So, okay, well, what's the guilt signaling? Oh, I actually ate 5 candy bars last night. Okay, now let's not sit in that guilt. Ask yourself why you were eating 5 candy bars. And it's like, well, I don't know. It's like, I felt good at the moment. Okay, but do you remember really asking yourself in the moment? And they never do, right? Because it's like a mindless kind of drug-like feeling that people get from it. So when you start to investigate these moments, it's so helpful for people because then they can be present. And you say, what's it serving? What's it doing for you? And once you start doing that, you start picking apart. It's like, oh, I'm actually in this moment now. I'm here, I'm present. Maybe I can stop. And it gives you so much more control within those binge eating moments rather than just letting that emotional mind take form. And I think you got some great insight here. One of the things I really wanted to ask you, because you said you come from being the skinnier kid and having a bit less of an appetite, but I also find this really interesting because it's got to be a bit of a different context for you coaching. Do you find, let's say you want to get lean, do you find you control your appetite very well? Like, do you find you relate to your clients very similarly as far as weight loss goals?
Oh, yeah.
Or do you find that there's any bit of a jump there when it comes from being someone who might have less an appetite than some people, but you still feel you relate quite well when it comes on the calorie deficit side?
Oh, yeah. Being in a deficit sucks. Like, it's not fun. Like, you're going to be hungry sometimes. Like, I'm hungry right now. It's around lunchtime, though. Last time I ate a meal was about 4 hours ago. 4 to 6 hours, eat a meal. Like, it's normal to be hungry sometimes within that. What I do find is that when I'm under a lot of stress, that hunger, it feels like I'm always hungry, but you're not. It's stress. It's the two skills that if everyone had these, you and I would be out of a job or have much easier time. Number one is if folks would recognize they're full and stop eating, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Between meals, if folks could distinguish hunger versus any emotion, boredom, exhaustion, would be great. It would literally cut snacking, right? And that's the thing that I can relate with everyone about. It has nothing to do, like, I've been eating in a surplus, or like 20, let's say 2,800, 3,000, like that's probably more my maintenance at that point, because the scale wasn't moving anymore. And that's probably what I should be eating, for the amount of activity I do. So of course I'm going to be hungry because I've cut my calories down, and it's only 30 days. So if I'm completely honest, it's probably a more aggressive deficit than I would put myself in if it was long-term, right? I wouldn't do that to someone else. I would do it in a way where it's like, but I'm experienced at this. I know I have this, like, it's not anything too crazy. And I think the biggest part about that is like the emotional and exhaustion. Like, the reason why I wanted to do this mini cut now is because in the next, like, could be next week, could be 2 weeks from now, I have a fucking newborn. I got a toddler who's 4. I'm not going to be sleeping. Like, I'm just not. But I wanted to show people that even with whatever's going on in your life, it is completely possible to still lose weight. It's completely possible to still maybe not do a full workout, but still get something. Like, I truly wanted to demonstrate the idea of something is better than nothing. Because sometimes, it seems too easy. It seems too easy for people sometimes. And the truth is, it's like, no, it's not that it's easy. It's just no one shows the other side of it. No one shows, like, any of that other stuff. Jordan Syatt, he does a great job of this, and I think he did this when old Abe, his daughter, was born. He showed, he was able to I think he did a mini cut like right around the time she was born and just showed the difference. It's like, yeah, like, my wife's the one who's doing the heavy lifting. Like, she's gonna be giving birth. It's not me. Yeah. The fuck am I complaining about? Like, it's not me. I, like, completely different. I'll be tired. I'll get more sleep eventually. Like, it's just like, you got to look at it from that point of view. So I hope people find it helpful,
I think that's really cool that you do that. And I really value coaches who want to lead by example like that. It's exactly what I try to do. I don't just do things because when it comes down to it, if I, you just want to be an online trainer that's doing bodybuilding competitions, you're only going to serve bodybuilding clients, right? Like you're not going to serve most of the general pop, even though Gen Pop will look at those people with this stature and they're like, oh, hey, they really know fitness. No, they know the fitness training lifestyle for bodybuilders and physique competitors. Completely different context when you want to have, as we mentioned, coaching people within a real life scenario. And I think that's really awesome that you're doing that. So I was also curious about some of your other things that make your program unique, that makes you unique as a coach. So kind of dive into that a little bit more. What do you think sets your coaching and you as a person a little bit different than the others?
I actually view like my clients as like family, like they're a member of the family. So the way I do like check-ins and everything, like when I talk with clients, like it's a video chat like this, like maybe 5-10 minutes of me just talking through their day, like what's going on with everything. And then they get that and they can listen to it and they can understand. They know that they can shoot me a message and like I'm there for them. I understand. I empathize. But at the same time, I don't bullshit. So I mean, I had a client who in the past struggled with disordered eating. Um, and recently, like she came to me because she was seeing a therapist for that, was in a good place, but it also gained like 150 pounds and wanted to lose weight in a more sustainable, like healthy way, learn about this, get away from binging tech, you know. And so we've been working together and she's dropped like 40 pounds. It's been almost a year. And they were like worried about this vacation they were going on and not being at a number they set for themselves. And like the video I sent back was like, shut the fuck up. Like, shut the fuck up with that. Like, shut the fuck up. Like, go look at this. Look at the numbers. Look at the work you're doing. How are you feeling right now? Are you sleeping well? How is your energy? How are you feeling? Are you hungry all the time? And she was just like, oh yeah, no, this is the best I've ever felt. Like, holy shit. And I was like, yeah. So shut the fuck up. Like that's me. Very much I'm not phony about any of it. And from a coaching perspective, I'm very honest with people. I say, yeah, it's like 6 months minimum to work together. If after 6 months, like you don't like me, you can tell me to fuck off. If you do like me, we'll just keep working together. And I think I just try to keep it as honest as possible. There's no need to make like smoke and mirrors or like I'm the great Wizard of Oz. Like there's none of that. It's just what you see on social media is me. Like I'm not this is the person. There's no fake, there's no nothing. Um and that's my hope for all coaches out there, that you can be yourself and not really have to do ridiculous, crazy, dumb things to try to get, whatever it is. And it's a long game, just being yourself and putting out content. And again, I said I started my online coaching thing in 2020, and now it's finally like in a place where it's cool, it's groovy. It just takes time. So when people come to me, it's just because they want someone who like relates, someone who has kids, someone who has an awareness around like emotional eating, someone who has an awareness around um, all or nothing thinking. Like a lot of people come to me for that at this point in my coaching. So it's fun. I get to work with a lot of different types of people too. I have worked with athletes. I've worked with people in their like 60s. Like I just work with the gamut of whoever needs help. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. I don't know if that makes me very different. It just makes me me.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful way to say it. And I love the honesty. And I think some people need that approach, right? You need to be able to shoot people straight and just like get that centering coach's opinion. so many people will, I know even from trying to coach myself, it's like you need someone to just be like, no, this is kind of the obvious thing you're not seeing, because we can all really love fitness and get caught up in our heads, and then it's just like the obvious thing is hard to see sometimes. And so that's what you need your coach for, to give you that assurance of like, hey, come on, like think this through a little bit more simplistically. It's great that you had that viewpoint for her to just center herself and not overthink it so much. And that also comes from a place of love, because you really are there to not make them overthink it, and it shows that you have a lot of care for it. Well, I think that's really awesome. So I would love to finish off with this one simple question, and I have an idea of direction, but as this is a Strong Ambition podcast, what's your most recent ambition? This could be work, life, professional. What are you most excited for coming down the pipeline?
Oh, just continuing to be a kick-ass dad. Like I'm really excited to have another kiddo on the way. Um, I've never raised two kids. Up until 4 years ago, I'd never raised a kid. Uh, it's one of the coolest things I've ever gotten the opportunity to do. And I love my wife so much. And together working as like a team, like it's so cool to see this human become somewhat an acceptable member of society. Uh, and I'm sure it's going to be a crazy adventure when this next kid shows up. Um, but my wife and I were in a completely different place. You know, full transparency, like we've gone to couples therapy. We've done like a lot of heavy lifting to try to get to be able to find ourselves again once we had our son. And now we have these tools in place. It's crazy. Like we have tools in place. So it's like we're a little nervous, but we're also like, no, we know what to do now. Like it's you know, my wife is my best friend. I'm such a lucky guy to have such a life the way I do have it. Um, yeah, I don't want to overlook that. So that's kind of how I'm viewing ambition right now. I just want to be able to spend as much time with them as possible while still being able to help people. And I'm very fortunate that working online, I get to do that. So, yeah.
That's a beautiful thing. And that is what life is all about. I always say that the three biggest things that you do in life are, what are you going to do? Your career, who's beside you when you do it, which is your partner, and who are you going to show how it's done? And that is the child that you have. And that's the hardest one, because you got to pretend that you know what you're doing while you're doing it. And so that's by far going to be your big challenge. And I'm curious from your standpoint, and I'm not sure if you did this with your first child or with this next one, do you believe that, like, let's say in the first, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, wherever, when it is like, the worst sleep that you get, do you just not exercise, or you still try to squeeze in body weight or anything? Like, what's your philosophy in that scenario?
Yeah, so the way I kind of I look at it as like prime time auto regulating. So it's like maybe I'll do something, maybe I'll just go for a walk. Maybe the reality is my wife's the one who's going to have to be recovering. I'm not going to bullshit. So what I'm already doing is I've been switching my morning workouts to evening workouts because I'm going to do the last feeding so my wife could sleep.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll probably work out at like 10 o'clock at night, but I'm also going to be going to bed at like 12. So it's like I'm still going to work out. Will they all be bangers? Fuck no. They're going to be, some of them are just going to be phoning it in. But it's more of the consistency for me, honestly. I'm someone who thrives on consistency and schedule. And if that means moving my schedule around, I'll do it. Do I recommend everyone do that? No. It's just fitness has been a part of my life for almost 15 years now, maybe 16 years. Like, so it's just like, I don't want to give that up.
Mm-hmm.
And a 20-minute workout is great. Like it still counts. When you get to a certain point, the amount of muscle mass someone has, like you can maintain it pretty much doing anything. If you think about it. And a lot of people don't, that's like kind of shocking. You can maintain it doing anything. Actually, any workout program will work for you. Like there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You could stick with it as long as you want. Will you make considerable gains after a while? No, but you'll still be able to maintain what you have, which is great. So for whatever that's worth, for whoever's listening to this, like You don't have the perfect plan. There's no fucking perfect plan. Just show up. Even when you don't want to get in the car and drive in the rain, you still get in the car and go to work. So same idea with this. Just show up and do the work warm up. That's what a lot of my clients, like, I'll say, like, can you commit to doing the warm up? Be like, yeah. Be like, cool. Just start there. See what happens.
Yeah. And I love just people need to appreciate that minimum effective dose. And I've been big on minimum effective dose. So many clients is that like a 20-minute workout actually can be really substantial when you're just trying to maintain. And most people don't realize, especially in a calorie deficit, you're mostly just trying to maintain. Like most people don't realize it's like just keep the muscle tissue, keep the function, and you establish that habit and don't let it go. And I'm even doing a challenge for myself right now. I'm only doing 30-minute workouts, only 4 lifts a week. And guess what? I'm maintaining muscle tissue. It's just about that simple stimulus. So I love that you still have that notion and you still have that, compliance with yourself of autoregulation. There's going to be days where maybe you don't work out for a day or 2 or 3, but you'll eventually be like, hey, I'm ready to move. And you're already kind of adapting that schedule. And I think that's a great way to do it. I think it's a really good thing for people to see that there is still a minimum that can give you something. And it's like, it doesn't have to be the all or nothing, even when life is a bit crazier. So I think that's a beautiful thing. And I'm really excited to see how that goes for you. I'll be watching your story for sure.
Yeah, I'm excited for it too. I'm not excited to be tired all the time again, but it's just par for the course. That's what coffee's for.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, thanks so much for coming on today, Chris. I really appreciate it. We'll have to have you on again in the future, as I know you got some great stuff, especially around calisthenics. And I want to hear more about that and the mobility training you're really into. But I appreciate the conversation. You have some great info here. Why don't you tell the listeners and viewers where they can find more about you?
Oh, yeah. So I'm pretty active. Like the place where I'm most active is on Instagram at coach.chrismcmahon. You can check there. If you want some free stuff, you can go to my website, chris-mcmahon.com. Tons of stuff there. If you want to work with me, like first go try some of my free stuff. See if you like that before you go ahead and try to work with me, just because you'll get to see what it's like and you'll see if you like me or not. You can also check me out on YouTube. There's videos that go up every single week on there at coach.chrismcmahon. And yeah.
That's perfect. All right. Thanks again so much, Chris. Appreciate having you on, and we'll be in touch soon.
Yeah, of course. Thanks.
Thanks again to Chris for that conversation. I really want to highlight some great points that we went over because I think they're valuable things for you to appreciate. The very first one I have to highlight is, the overweight versus being skinny struggle are both struggles. And I don't think it's a context that I really considered when I was younger and not even that long ago, probably even like 10 years ago. I used to say whenever someone was skinnier, it was just, you don't know what it's like. It's way harder when you're overweight. And it's always someone else's struggle. It's always real for them. And imagine if you never had to deal with the fear of being overweight, but you always felt small. You always felt small. And comments of being skinny is going to be the same feeling you feel when someone calls you fat. If anything, I feel like I've seen more people casually use the term skinny without being fearful of hurting people's feelings more often. So it almost gets thrown around more. And so it's still a discomfort, and you have to value that and appreciate that people can come from that. And to also, in some way, I feel like that's helped me be grateful for where I am, because I never had to deal with someone calling me skinny. Very rarely. I think a handful of times because I was wearing the right shirt, I look like a smaller guy. But to have kind of gratefulness for where I am coming from. So because my gratitude comes from, it's not the grass is greener on the other side. It's that it's a different shade. So they have different benefits and drawbacks from their metabolism, right? So for my benefit and drawback, obviously the drawback is I put on weight excessively, but I put on good weight easier. Like I can gain size easier. I never felt really like a small guy too long in my life. Only at one point when I was in grade 9 waiting for puberty to hit. And then from there, I started to gain strength and size. And it was never a question of whether or not I had strength and size. So people wouldn't question my stature as often. And so that's something I see as a major benefit for me versus someone who was skinnier always has to confront that fear. I had a friend of mine, his younger brother, always used to say that he wouldn't go to a certain part of the gym because that's where the monsters train. And it just didn't dawn on me that he would literally be afraid to be by the bigger weights because it intimidated him. And I'd never experienced that. So I'm grateful that I have that stature. I'm not afraid of that. Now, the drawback, obviously, is my appetite. There's also a benefit to that because my friend's younger brother, who didn't really pay attention to his diet, had a hard time gaining weight, but he just didn't feel the need to pay attention to it. So he always ate bad. So I established habits at a young age to start paying attention to it, start trying diets, start trying these things. Because if you normally put on weight, you are willing to pay attention to your diet sooner. So that's the benefit along with the drawback. So I think it's important to see whatever side of the coin you're on, that there's going to be benefits and drawbacks, but pay attention to what to be grateful for, because then you can work on the things that you don't have, but you get to appreciate what you do have. And I think that depiction makes a huge difference on where you're sitting. And metabolisms vary. I think it's super cool for you to hear that he eats the same calories as me for a calorie surplus. People need to value that that's where there is a bit of a magic in metabolism, but you can't change it. And it's not to blame your metabolism. It's a very normal thing for him to burn more calories just spontaneously and probably with activity, probably has a decent amount of steps, but he'll just get fidgety. And my brother's similar. He'll just fidget a lot more than me. And I can't change that. But what we did both mention is you can regulate your form of activity every day, but just making sure that you walk enough. Just that little thing is the one way that you say, hey, my metabolism is not what it used to. Well, you can do this with your metabolism. Strength train, eat protein, sleep enough, and walk. And the walk is the one that you want to regulate for sure. It's just like, hey, if I at least get 10K steps a day, I'm probably going to do most of what I need. And so that you can use that as a way to regulate your need to not let that go too far down. Because if you're already a sedentary person, that's what you need to regulate. It was really interesting to hear him talk about type 1 diabetes. And it's important for people to value that type 1 diabetes are, it's a very normal thing for someone to have to wear a CGM, continuous glucose monitor, and worry about blood sugar. But as he had mentioned, if you have a working pancreas, you don't have to worry as much as you think. But all these habits that he had established from it are actually good for all of us, to have high fiber, to go for walks, and to just, have a really whole food, complete diet. And I wanted to dive more into it, but we got on a lot of different other topics. It's just not something that you have to panic about unless you feel like your high blood sugar is like pre-diabetic. You've been told you're pre-diabetic, then that's a concern. But unless you feel that blood sugar rise and crash, and that crash causes you to stimulate your appetite more, then I would pay attention to it. Then I would pay attention to, okay, maybe have more fiber in those meals. But if you're having fiber distributed throughout the day anyways, protein distributed throughout the day anyways, and you just don't have a ton of heavily processed high glycemic foods, you probably won't have an issue. Even if you have rice with a meat, that rice glycemic index is now brought down because of the protein and fat. So we don't have to get tied up into it too much, but it is still helpful if you're that worried about it. Pay attention to some of the tips that he gave you, because it's just very simply good dieting practice when it comes down to it. I really loved his tough love coaching, where it was just, shut up, you're overthinking it, because we can totally major in the minors when we get into this, because there are a lot of little habits, but there's too many little ones. There's too much, there's hyper fixations on things. And when you're trying to enjoy life, that's a very important thing, that you enjoy it. Going on a vacation and then to hyperfixate on your diet is a great way to ruin your vacation. It really is. And it's not that you want to go on vacation and then just binge. That's not the goal either. And it's not the easiest practice, but to have an appreciation, as he had mentioned, I loved how he pointed this out, is appreciate where you come from. I think that's a really important thing. Appreciate how you've built yourself into such a lifestyle. Be like, hey, I've come a long way. And if weight scale goes up like a pound or two after a vacation, it's not the end of the world. But I think this is the value for you to consider a coach, or someone that can help you like a coach. in terms of we can overthink things and you need someone to tell you to shut the fuck up sometimes and just focus on the simplistic stuff, because it goes a long way. I know it has for me for sure. And I love hearing his story about fitness as a father, because so many people will kind of, I don't want to say this out of context because I'm not a father. I take care of my dogs and that's about it. But what he had mentioned is that you can still make it fit with just this minimal effective dose. And I even know a vegetable farmer that worked with me for a while, that the guy's working 16-hour days. He still fit in 30 minutes 3 times a week, and it helped him gain size still. He gained lean mass in that process. And so if you can just value that, maybe if you just do 20 minutes here and there, no matter how busy you are, you can still just kind of chip away at even just the habit itself. And as we mentioned, minimum effective dose just to maintain muscle is very minimal. It's really too easy sometimes for us to say, well, I just don't have time. And I don't think that's the right language. I don't think those are the right words to use. If you want to say, I'm not prioritizing it right now, I think that's okay. If you literally just make that agreement with yourself, I'm not prioritizing it. It's not important right now. That's okay. I don't think you should necessarily. I'm biased, but I don't think you should. You can say it's a minimal priority, but having just that little bit of, okay, I can still just get a little bit done. I could just do body weight reverse lunges today. That's my workout. I'm going to do it until I'm sore on one side. And I tell you, I've done this all the time during harvest. Almost every year I'll do at least one workout. In some years, all I was doing was just workouts in the field, and I maintained muscle tissue in that time period. Last year I was doing 30-minute workouts with nothing but a band, and I put on size. Now I was coming from the bodybuilding show, so I knew my body was prone to put on size, but it was 30-minute workouts with bands, and I'm a pretty big guy and I'm an experienced lifter, and you can still gain muscle tissue in that time frame. So minimum effective dose exists, and I think more people need to look at that. And that's one of the main things Chris highlighted at the start. It's not like the most you can do. It's like, what's the little bit you need to do consistently? And that's what more people need to ask themselves when it comes to fitness. I think it was a really good episode. I think he had some great information. I do recommend you go check out his channel, as he's always putting out new information. He's very consistent on his Instagram account and his YouTube. So I think you'll learn a lot from him. I really appreciate him coming on, and I appreciate you as a listener, as I'm always here to try to help you, thinking about your own ambition, what you're going after, because life is not about the pursuit of happiness, my friend. It's about the happiness within pursuit. And I'll catch you next time.